Should the Nittany Lions be concerned about their transfer portal losses? I mean, after all, these were 4 would-be contributors.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football and the transfer portal, and thank you for checking out this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the show. But in this episode, I'm going to be a guest over on Locked On's The Portal. It's the podcast devoted entirely to the transfer portal, to recruiting. With host Brian Smith, we're going to discuss Penn State's transfer portal losses. Are they going to be able to overcome them? And the needs that they might need to return from the portal, and so much more. Without further ado, enjoy.
They've lost a few kids to the portal. Before we go into specific names, is there anybody you're like, dang it, I really wish that guy would have stuck around with the Nittany Lions?
Yeah, I actually like the way that question's framed. I think most people were surprised by Tamir Robinson going into the transfer portal. Now, from the outside point of view, maybe within the halls of Penn State, it was a different story, but I thought Tamir Robinson was the 4th best linebacker in this group. And linebacker depth is at least a question mark for, I think, most people. Not for me, actually. And now this didn't obviously help, but I thought Robinson was going to be a serious contributor this season. I thought he would have been in the 2-deep rotation because they're running a 4-2-5. So they'll have the first 2 linebackers, most likely Rojas and Dom DeLuca, and then Robinson and Keon Wiley would have been that second group. And he goes into the portal. So maybe he wasn't the clear-cut LB4. LeVar Arrington II has had rave reviews here in spring football practice. Also Anthony Specca, just some other linebackers. But I really did think that Robinson was going to take that next step with Penn State. So that's the one that's kind of shocking, if you will, or somebody that Penn State definitely needed in the rotation. I think they could have used him, and I thought he would have had a breakout season, or at least been one of the players that you could list in Penn State breakouts. But now he's at USC.
John Mitchell, he was only there for a year. Kid that I had a chance to scout. He played at Mandarin High School in Jacksonville, Florida. Any surprise that he left? Any disappointment? Or was it no big deal?
So Penn State secondary is loaded. Of course, you want somebody like John Mitchell in your defensive back room. Versatile, talented. There was just no path for him to get onto the football field as a legitimate starter, even in the rotation as well. Because, what about 2026? A.J. Harris will go off to the NFL draft. Well, then Kenny Wosley is becoming a player that has had a lot of praise. This guy should be at the top of Penn State breakout list. So he shared that room with John Mitchell. So that was just it, is that, okay, there's going to be all this turnover at cornerback that eventually John Mitchell will just get his turn. He's just got to wait another year. That wasn't the case. There were also reports of homesickness. He wanted to move closer to friends and family. So I don't blame him there. You want somebody like that on your roster, regardless of where they are in the depth chart. So Penn State's losing out on an ultra-talented player with a lot of potential still. Georgia Tech gets a great addition, but certainly not something that Penn State can't stomach here. Kind of like a Tamir Robinson. It's like, okay, you would like to have him in the rotation. John Mitchell. Fortunately for Penn State, this isn't a massive loss because of where the secondary is.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have, because I think he would probably be on the 2-deep at most schools by his sophomore year, which John will be this next fall, and Georgia Tech needs DBs. So he'll probably be one of their top 5 corners in the fall pretty quick, and may even be in the top 3. I would not be surprised. He can really run. As the transfer portal comes to an end, and for those that don't know, it ends on Friday. Penn State has got to get down to the 105 limit. What is it? August 1st? July 15th?
July 1st. I thought it was July 1st.
Might be July. Whatever the date is. It's not that far off, really.
Yeah.
Players are going to be leaving, but the new rule is you're at 105, but that includes everybody. If you got a walk-on, that counts against the cap, and you got to pay for their scholarship, etc. So, it's put a wrench in a lot of things. Penn State's way over the cap, and so are a lot of other schools. Do you think Penn State will have to cut any scholarship guys, or is it going to be just walk-ons and then it is what it is from there?
We're starting to see a little bit of attrition. We've seen 4 scholarship players go into the portal, 5 in total, but one of them was honestly, I thought he would have eventually earned a scholarship. So that's just because he's a walk-on now doesn't mean he couldn't have been a scholarship player. And that's what this is doing. This is hurting the journey of the walk-on. This don't have these opportunities. I think he could be he might move back up at some point in time. His name's Beck MD. But they've lost JB Nelson, who was a starting caliber offensive lineman, but wouldn't have been at Penn State this season. Penn State's come a long way with its offensive line. So that's saying something that JB Nelson wasn't going to be a clear-cut starter. He was in the battle for the guard spot, but I saw him as more of a 6th man. He would have played right tackle, both guards, maybe even center if they needed him to. Well, he's in the portal. They just recently lost Joseph Mapoye, just never panned out, had this insanely athletic build, came in at 6'5", 260 pounds, just never put it all together at defensive end or defensive tackle. So he's going to go into the portal. And then we talked about John Mitchell and Tamir Robinson. So there might be a few more scholarship players. It's also dependent on, okay, if anybody enters in last second that is classified as a need for Penn State, slot receiver, Trevor Pena, right? So if Penn State's going to try to bring anybody in, that means they're going to have to push somebody else out. So that could be really quick at the end. It's mostly going to be walk-ons. Penn State calls them run-on players. They don't say walk-on, they say run-on. So just a little distinction there. But as far as scholarship players go, an exodus of scholarship players, probably not in this case. We might see a few more surprises that lose some position battles here and there. But if anything substantial happens, it will certainly catch me off guard.
Well, Penn State's in a rather good spot, I think, overall. What's the biggest concern going into the 25 season positionally? Like, is there a spot that you're worried about depth or anything else? Where would it be?
Defensive tackle, and I think we've talked about that before. At least I've gone on to my show, other Locked On shows, to say that, hey, I got to circle defensive tackle here. Zane Durant is All-America caliber. Alonzo Ford is coming off of injury. He's all-conference caliber. After that, it's completely unknown. Xavier Gilliam is someone that is expected to step up. He would be in that breakout category. He has been penciled in as the 3rd defensive tackle for Penn State per James Franklin. He ranked them. He said, hey, Zane Durant's 1, Alonzo Ford's 2. Xavier Gilliam has now separated himself from the pack as that 3rd DT. After that, it's just a lot of names. Even still, Xavier Gilliam is unproven. So how good of a 3rd defensive tackle is he? If Zane Durant got hurt, if Alonzo Ford never fully recovers from his injury, what does that mean for Penn State when this is a national title contending team? If you lose either of those players, particularly Durant, and you got to increase somebody else's snap count. Hey, look, I like where the potential lies for Liam Andrews and Owen Wafel and DeAndre Cook and Randy Adarica. You know him very well. They have a great future, but what about their present? The nice thing is that Penn State has the depth, but they don't have an immediate impact player. And unfortunately for Penn State, there hasn't been an immediate impact player that's gone into the portal outside of the defensive tackle from Syracuse, and he's committed to Texas. That was quick. That didn't take very long. So Penn State's in a situation where they do have a lot of names. They have a full depth chart at defensive tackle, but what is the immediate impact of those players? Hopefully they can get better sooner rather than later, because maybe like the offensive line, this is just the optimism that they peak towards the end of the season, that you get a couple of guys to break out week 10, week 11, week 12, kind of like the offensive line did. The offensive line for Penn State was, they were okay, middle of the road. Then they really settled in when it mattered most in the playoffs. But that's hypothetical. That's optimism. And Penn State clearly doesn't want to take that chance because they tried recruiting players out of the portal in the winter. They didn't get David Blay. And nobody in the spring, there hasn't been somebody that's better than what they have go into the spring, of the exception of 1 or 2 players, maybe.
Yeah, I think that Penn State, they got to get a D tackle in the spring. I mean, for the record, you don't have to make your decision before the portal window ends, but you got to get your name in the ring
in the 10 days.
I mean, May or June, whatever the situation is, but they can't just get a guy. They got to get somebody with some experience.
Yes.
They got to spend some cash. And Murad Watson, the kid you were talking about going to Texas, was an opportunity, but there'll be a few others. In the next, I'd say 48 hours, you're going to see a lot of kids that have their exit interviews at schools. They don't like where they're at. They don't like the coach, whatever it is. They'll be in the portal. So Penn State will get their chance. When we come back, we're going to talk a little Penn State recruiting, just get a little bit of an update, and then just talk about Penn State football as they head into 2025. That is next here on the Portal Podcast.
And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you will get $250 in bonus bets. That's right, $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. You'll love using FanDuel because FanDuel makes betting easy, whether it's picking your favorite teams or your favorite player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists to rebounds, you name it. FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite players and your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, so even if you miss the start of the game, you can even combine your live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Now, don't miss out. Head over to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today if your first $5 bet wins. All you got to do is head over to FanDuel.com to claim that $250 in bonus bets.
All right, Zach. It's the end of spring. You got the blue-white, I don't know if it's a scrimmage, game, showcase, what everybody's doing something.
Showcase, something like that.
It's
a glorified practice, and it really always has been, but it's not a game. It is no longer even close to a game.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Is it televised or no?
This one is not televised.
Yeah,
and this might be the last one ever.
Yeah, that's not surprising. Everybody's just worried about the portal. If there was no spring window, everybody's would be televised.
Yes.
Point blank. But anyway, what do you think recruiting wise? Are they going to be in position for any more commitments here soon? Is there anything trending? What do you got for me?
Yeah, I mean, they just picked up a defensive line commitment the day of the recording of this podcast. Isaac Chukura is an unknown defensive tackle. He's an edge defender right now as he's listed because the recruiting services are catching up to this. But Penn State doesn't take commitments by accident. So blue-white weekend is normally weak again because they're going to get prospects to visit. Penn State is going to have a simulation of the experience. Players are going to run out on the football field. There's going to be a crowd of, I expect maybe 60, 70,000. That's usually the ballpark for this. And with this might be the last blue and white game that fans might show up just to kind of say that, okay, we went to the last one or the last official one, if you will. So this is an opportunity, great opportunity to have more recruits on campus to really, make your pitch. But Penn State has been on this recruit. I mean, it's been up and down. That's usually how it goes. They'll go in streaks where they'll go cold, or then all of a sudden they pick up 2 or 3 commits in a week. So could they get some commitments over blue-white weekend? Absolutely. Would I be surprised if they happened a week later or 2 weeks later? Not either, but I wouldn't be surprised by that either. May, June, July, this is where Penn State does a lot of its heavy lifting because they want it taken care of mostly before the season starts.
What about in-state recruiting? They got is it Falzone or Falzone?
Falzone. Yep, Falzone.
I like him as a quarterback. You and I had talked about him a while back. Iowa and a whole bunch of other schools were after him. So they get their second quarterback. Were you surprised that Penn State went with the second quarterback in the class of 26?
There's so many directions I can take this. I'm glad that they got Peyton Falzone because I think the upside is through the roof. I really don't know that I can project this guy's ceiling right now. This guy very well might turn into a 5-star. He is legitimate. He has all the athleticism in the world. It's about fine-tuning the technique. But it's come along so quickly that Penn State said, we have to find a way to secure his commitment because we don't want this to be Matt Zollers all over again, where he ended up turning into a 5-star, committing to Missouri. So other schools were starting to get involved in his recruitment. He's an in-state guy. You got to get him. They did. So 2 quarterbacks doesn't scare me or anything like that, Falzone's going to feel some type of way about Troy Huhn in reverse. I think Penn State's actually going to be able to keep them both happy because Troy Huhn committed fairly early. Would it shock me if Huhn decommitted because he is from California? No, it would not. I think at some point there's going to be other schools in his senior season that are going to say, hey, you got 2 quarterbacks committed there at Penn State. Are you reconsidering? It is a little crowded there, but that's where the transfer portal comes into play. May the best player win the position battle at the end of the day. and then the transfer portal is there. So I think that's Penn State's pitch right now. And it's probably a lot of other schools. If you're not doing this way, then you're doing it wrong, where you recruit as much talent as possible, sell them on the beginning of their development. And if it doesn't work, you can hit the portal. That's really, so may the best QB win, whether that's Hune, whether that's Beckham Kritza, whether that's Peyton Falzone. When it's their turn after Ethan Grunkemeyer, the guys that don't end up working out can just go into the portal. But I think Penn State has promised them to at least get them on the right track, and that's a good selling point at this time. So both quarterbacks, I think, are going to stay in the class of 2026, with the exception that I think if any QB is going to decommit, I think it's going to be Troy Hune.
I know that Penn State's still trying to get Joey O'Brien. I'm going to probably mispronounce his name, that McHugh, the offensive tackle that plays with him, and some other kids in state. Do you think there's been more of an in-state focus this year, or is it about the same as prior seasons?
I think it's always the same. I think Penn State's definitely shifted a little more. So they've been Pittsburgh, Central Pennsylvania, but they're trying to get a little more focused into Philadelphia. That extends into New Jersey. They're trying to move east. But the dominate the state has always been the mantra of James Franklin. So this has been going on since 2014. For Penn State, they want to win the state of Pennsylvania because then it makes people less inclined to, right? You see, I don't mean to make an example of John Mitchell, but he got homesick. It's from the state of Florida. You can't get homesick if you're from Central PA. If you're from Pittsburgh, your family and friends are right by. I'm not saying that's the end all be all. I'm just saying that's one of them. So Penn State, it has been the best school in the state of Pennsylvania when it comes to college football for a very long time. And the recruiting follows because of it. So you need to anchor down in the home state, which is always what Penn State has done. And they continue to do it. But how much success have they had in certain classes? It's also dependent on who's coming out of the state of Pennsylvania. Just because they say dominate the state doesn't mean all the prospects that are there automatically become Penn State Nittany Lions. There have been years where, hey, the state of Pennsylvania just didn't produce a lot of good talent this year. But that's not routinely the case. Fortunately for Penn State, the home territory usually has a lot of good high school prospects. Nicholas Singleton in years past, right? Joey O'Brien this time around. Kevin Brown's committed. Joey O'Brien, they're really trying to work at that one. But I just think of, hey, Abdul Carter from the state of Pennsylvania. And like I mentioned, Nicholas Singleton. There are so many players that they want. Messiah Mickens in this class of 2026. There are so many names from Pennsylvania that Penn State wants to get and bring in, and they're doing that to a T this time around. They're not playing catch up, because the last time we had this conversation a year ago over the summer, they were playing catch up, and they did end up catching up. But this time they're out in front, and they're trying to use the leverage that they have with the likes of a Kevin Brown and Messiah Mickens to go and get a McHugh and O'Brien, or at least have a strong attempt at them.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. They're not really going outside the box here because they don't have to. I think it's a smart decision. And I think if they grind away, they'll end up with a top 10, top 15 class, and they'll have kids that are loyal. Like you just brought up something that's important. It's one thing to sign them. It's another thing to keep them. Penn State does a pretty darn good job of that.
Still to come on this crossover between the portal and Locked On Nittany Lions. Are Penn State still national title contenders? What is the confidence level as spring practices end? That's coming up next here on the show. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty 6, Black Ops 6, and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. And now you'll get affordable and portable gaming. Play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. And if you already have a console, a Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable, and it's easier to travel with, allowing you to take your favorite games wherever you plug in. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller are required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen.
last little bit here for me. After the end of spring, did you feel better about Penn State or worse compared to where you were, say, like a week before spring ball began?
I think it's just a little more, I sometimes get, I'm not afraid to admit this. I get a little caught up in the Penn State bubble. So when coming out of the winter transfer portal window and they add Kyron Hudson and they add Devontae Ross and there isn't all this turnover, it's Penn State's in a really good position. But then just as you see, it's just the natural workings, the attrition of college football. Okay, you lose a JB Nelson, you lose a John Mitchell, Tamir Robinson. It's those guys, the depth would have really helped for a national title run. And then you just see Texas go out and overhaul. How many defensive tackles did they get in the portal, Brian? 4, 5, and I'm sitting over here talking about how Penn State needs defensive tackle help, and Texas is going to be one of those teams that are maybe at the end. Maybe Penn State, Texas play each other in the 2026 national title game. Maybe if anybody's going to try to clip that, but I think Penn State, it's just kind of a reality check that, okay, hey, Penn State might not be as strong of a title contender because now you're seeing Ohio State make some additions. You're seeing Oregon make some moves, Texas, and Penn State, I think after the winter portal window did have a little bit of a gap on some of these other serious contenders, but now the dust is starting to settle after the spring, in the middle of the spring portal window. And it's starting to balance out. So my confidence for Penn State in itself is the same, but the competition around Penn State has gotten better.
I think that's a pretty well placed thought. Right now, I don't see how Texas is not number one because they got the most depth at D tackle and they've got a quarterback. I think we all know Arch is going to be pretty good. I think that's a safe assumption. But Texas, I think, knows their window is also very small. Like Arch might leave after this year, so they're just like, the heck with it. We're going to spend money. Any position besides D tackle that you would like to see Penn State get somebody, regardless when it is, through the portal?
Again, it just can't be anybody. People think that, wide receiver's been bad or linebacker's a question mark. So if you see a linebacker in the portal, go get them. They have to be a fit. They have to fit into the system. There's a reason that despite a clear need at defensive tackle, Penn State hasn't been pushing for everybody and anybody. Same thing at wide receiver. They're not just pushing for anybody. They made a push for Trevor Pena, and now things are pending at this point because Miami, UCLA, and USC are all getting involved. Penn State's been strategic. I don't expect them to change or to do anything else. Everything's a want at this point. You want the wide receivers to be better. You want the linebackers to be better. You want the defensive tackles to be better. But technically, Penn State doesn't have any needs. They have wants. You want everybody to be better. You don't want to lose players to the portal, but they don't have any glaring needs. Whereas Texas went into this portal cycle, they needed everybody and anybody at defensive tackle because they had nobody, which is why they went and got, 4 or 5 different players. For Penn State, they have to be very selective. They're up against it with the roster limit. I don't see that. Trevor Pena would be nice. He'd be a starting slot receiver for Penn State. But outside of that, there isn't a player that defensive end. They're fine. They're great at defensive end. A lot of depth. Deny Dennis Sutton. Zariah Fisher's coming back from injury. They have starters. They have their 2 deep. Offensive line, very well, might be the best offensive line in the country with its starting group and the depth behind them. That's a top 3 group conservatively. You have Drew Aller. You have Nicholas Singleton. You have Katron Allen. Tight end set. Secondary is set. So, yeah, you could improve these position groups, but you don't need anybody per se. And Penn State understands that. They're fairly content with what, outside of slot receiver with Trevor Pena, they are pretty content with what they have on their roster right now.
That is a very, very good situation to be in. I think Penn State's conservatively a top 5 team. I mean, after the portal's done, we'll figure all that stuff out. But they're in a really good spot for this next year. Zach, tell everybody where they can find your work.
Same as you, on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Daily episodes around Penn State football, recruiting, wrestling, basketball, you name it. It's over there at Locked On Nittany Lions.
You can find the Portal Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and all the same places you find Locked On Nittany Lions. I do believe that we're going to have a lot more portal discussion with Mr. Seyko and several other people coming up here pretty soon because end of the week, again, the portal is going to end, but that does not mean the portal madness does. It's just beginning.
And again, thank you so much for the support. Thank you for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, go check out The Portal with host Brian Smith. That's the podcast devoted to everything. The transfer portal, go figure with the name, recruiting, and everything. As college football is an ever-changing landscape, you want to be able to keep up with all of the news, the rumors, the latest analysis. Brian Smith has you covered with The Portal. It's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.